Welcome to the Encore Audio Archives YouTube channel. I'm Taper Dave, and this is my channel. I've uploaded hundreds of talks here that I've recorded at meetings in West LA, and I've also recorded conventions starting in 2013. I've got a bunch of those up. And Walt and Mary Murray, the original owners of Encore Audio Archives, started the company in the 80s, and Walt recorded Joe and Charlie's and a bunch of stuff down in Vista, California. My sobriety date is June 20th of 1994. I hope you find something you like, so please like and subscribe to my channel and comment down below. If you want to hear something that I don't have or that you don't see, I'll see that I get it. Anyways, take care and have a great day if you want to.
Good evening, my name's Karl. I'm an alcoholic. I'd like to thank Mike for having me out here, and I'd like to thank Candace for coming along with me. She's my Valentine. Awfully pretty one, I think. Absolutely gorgeous. And understanding also that on Valentine's Day she would come along with me out to who knows where, we're not quite sure where we are, to go talk at a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. And anyway, I'm just going to stick with what it was like, what happened, what it's like now. I do that because the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous tells us there's a reason for it. The reason for sticking to that. It's just, well, there's a million reasons. I'm not even going to go into it. I'm just going to stick to it. That's what I'm going to do. And I didn't start drinking until I was 11. And I didn't. I got sober at 25. I'm 35 now. And just took 10 years last month. But I took a drink at 11, and it was just out of curiosity. I did not have any giant hole in my gut or any major dysfunctional family or any great pain going on at 11. I just took it out of curiosity. Prior to that, I had spent the majority of my childhood on the island of Borneo with my family. It was a strange situation, but I just remember having a wonderful childhood. And our family moved back to Seattle when I was about 9 and 11. I took my first drink just out of curiosity. And what happened to me that night is what makes me bodily and mentally different from other people. What happened is my parents were out of town for the weekend. I stole a bottle of wine from my father. I locked myself in his study, and I proceeded to drink. Halfway through that first bottle of wine, I got this. I don't even need to describe the feeling to you guys. You guys know the feeling. If I were at the Rotary Club, I'd have to describe what that feeling is, and most of them would go, huh? But just this feeling of just incredible well-being. I just remember going down to my toes and kind of coming back up, and just, and I was about 4'3", and I remember feeling about 5 foot, and sticking my little chest out, and I just loved that feeling, and that's the last thing I consciously remember that night, is that feeling. And I blacked out. The next thing I remember is I came to in my bedroom the next morning, and there was puke everywhere. All over the wall, all over the floor, in the pillowcase, in my underwear, I mean everywhere. And I knew I was going to have to puke again. I made it into the bathroom, realized I'd puked all over the bathroom, slipped on the bathroom floor, hit my head on the toilet bowl going down, and as I crawled back up to get my head back in the toilet bowl, I felt that wonderful, wonderful feeling that I would feel many times later in my life, and that is how nice and cold that porcelain feels on the side of your face. Oh, loved that feeling. And I got my head back in that toilet bowl, and I started to heave. And in between the 5th and 6th heave, I heard a voice. That voice was mine, and it said, "Karl, we're going to do this again." So right there, within 12 hours of taking my first drink, all of the components of alcoholism were active in my life. Halfway through that first bottle of wine, I got the allergic abnormal reaction. The phenomenon of craving kicked in. I lost control over the amount that I drank. And the next morning, in between the 5th and 6th heave, the mental obsession was there. You know, our book says we failed to bring into sufficient force the pain and humiliation of even a week or a month ago. There I was, puking my guts out, and I forgot the pain and suffering of half a second ago on my last dry heave. And I'm planning on doing it again. And it was all because of that feeling that I got somewhere in that first bottle of wine that I drank. I later on found out that that's not the only bottle of wine I drank. I guess I went and I stole another one that, of course, I was in a blackout. Found it out quite a bit later. It was a bottle of wine my father had been saving for about 20 years. He was happy that was missing when he finally decided to drink that. But anyway, that's what makes me alcoholic, is that my body reacts abnormally to alcohol, and then my mind will make up any reason to take another drink. And I started drinking alcoholically right from the gate, there at 11 years old. Before I started drinking, I was a goofy kid, short hair, playing violin, doing really well in school, loved my family. Once I started drinking, everything changed. Out went the violin, in came the heavy metal guitar, wanted to grow my hair down to my ass. School became a very secondary issue, and my parents became the enemy immediately. A lock went on my bedroom door, black lights went up in my room, posters went up. My gods became Jimmy Page and Richie Blackmore, and my parents just went, wow! And I was back behind that locked door going, wow. And typical morning in 7th grade would be we'd show up early for school, not for study hall or anything, but to meet the other guys, right? In the old beat-up building at the edge of the school property, and some kid would bring a jar full of vodka or some sort of mixture made out of his father's liquor cabinet, you know, and I couldn't believe that there was this one kid that whenever it was his turn to get the mixture, it always really tasted bad. We drank it anyway, but it was because his father drank martinis, and this kid didn't know that vermouth was only supposed to be something put on the side of a glass and twirled and dumped out. He would put in just as much vermouth as the rest of the things. You know, we'd pound that stuff down anyway. And of course, it was the early 70s, so we were smoking that commercial pot. Anybody remember that stuff? 4-finger lids, $10 a bag, seeds and stems and the whole bit. And you know, we'd pack that into a homemade pipe, maybe made out of plumbing fittings or in a screen, or if we were really desperate, a toilet paper roll with aluminum foil and pinholes in it. And we'd get all that into a pipe, hit the lighter on that, and the seeds and stems would be popping. We'd be burning holes in our clothes. We wander off to school maybe. And through a series of events, by the time I'm 14, I'm the neighborhood drunk and the neighborhood drug dealer. I forgot to mention, but my father was a neighborhood Lutheran minister. My parents always blame my problems on people, places, and things. We can get them away from that damn group of kids, things will be fine. We can get them out of that damn public school system, things will be fine. And they tried and they tried. God bless those people. And when I was about 18, I barely scraped out of the public school system. They decided that Seattle was the problem now. And if we can get them out of Seattle, things will be fine. So they sent me across state to Washington State University. I spent 3 years at that university on my parents' money, and I got about 10 credits. At any given time, my grade point average matched my blood alcohol content, about a .25. I did absolutely nothing at that school. By the time I was 22, this little story I'm about to tell you will let you know exactly where I stood with my family. Now, my father was Swedish, my mother is Icelandic, therefore I look like a polar bear. And I don't know whether this custom I'm about to tell you is Scandinavian or whether it's Lutheran, I don't know. But at Christmas time, my parents would not just send out Christmas cards, they would send out a big long Christmas letter. A letter that said everything about what the family had been doing that year. And they would send hundreds of these out, and they would receive hundreds of them back. It's just apparently what their circle of friends did. And when I was about 22, I had not interacted with my family hardly at all in a few years, but I got a hold of one of these letters that they had sent out the previous Christmas. And as I read it, it really let me know where I stood with my family. The first paragraph, as I read it, talked about what my parents had been doing that year. The second paragraph talked about what the Morris children had been doing that year. And that paragraph went something like this. Our oldest daughter, Christina, just graduated from Cornell University in Ithaca, New York with a master's degree in marketing. She's now working for the Eli Lilly Pharmaceutical Company in Indianapolis, Indiana as a marketing director. She traveled to Europe this summer. She saw this, she saw that. She's decided that her hobbies are this, this, and this. She's in the church choir. She's very happy. We're very proud of her. Our oldest son, Eric, just graduated from Washington State University with a degree in advertising. He's now working for a large advertising firm here in Seattle named McCann Erickson. His hobbies are this, this, and this. He volunteers here. He does this. He's about ready to be married to this wonderful woman named Mary Lou who works for, this will let you know how long ago it was. He's about ready to be married to this wonderful woman named Mary Lou who works for a small company here in Seattle named Microsoft. And they travel together, they golf together. He's very happy. He's very proud. We're very proud of him. Our youngest son, Karl, just turned 22. There was nothing else to say. That was it. It's right about that same time that my parents basically just said, you know what, we don't want you here anymore. We know what you've been doing. You know, we tried to deny the fact that you've been dealing drugs and you're a drunk. And we've tried to help you, and all you do is spit in our face. So all you do is spit in our face. And so you're on your own. We don't want you to come back here. That's it. I remember packing my car up that day, and I was going to head south. And now I'd had a lot of cars. My cars, they were something. I'd had a lot of cars ever since I'd been 16 years old. And they would always start out as perfectly good used cars, but they would die of alcoholism along the way. I don't know if your cars did that, but mine did. And this will tell you exactly why I drank. If I were physically sober on any given morning, meaning I just haven't had a drink yet that day, And I come out of wherever I happen to be living, whether it be my parents' basement or a park, depending on what part of my life we're talking about. And I just haven't had a drink yet that day. I'm a little restless, a little discontent, a little twitchy, and kind of, and I walk up to a car that I've owned for a while, and I see the dents and the broken windows, and I just get mad. I deserve better than that. And I'd get in and I'd smell the rancid smell of stale alcohol in the carpets, and I'd see the cigarette and hot box burns on the seats, and I'd get madder by the second. And I'd turn that key, and I'd be puttering down the road, hitting on one cylinder, and I'd look over at some young guy that has a nice car on his way to work and something going on in his life, and I'd just say to myself, damn it! What do I got to do to get ahead in this effing world? Just a little edgy here. Just a little edgy. And all I'd have to do is go drink for a couple of hours. Right? And after I drink for a couple of hours, I'd walk back up to that very same car. Now as I'd approach the car, I'd say to myself, why that 62 Dodge Coronet is a classic. And I'd get in, it wouldn't smell bad anymore. And then the most miraculous thing I ever experienced prior to coming to Alcoholics Anonymous would happen when I'd turn the key. Now when I turn the key, it's just, as far as I was concerned, boom, it's like a mechanic had been working on my car. This is a driving man's dream. Look at the way they send corners at 70 miles an hour. See, I didn't know that this reaction or relationship to alcohol was going to take me to the gates of insanity or death. The ability of alcohol to completely change my perception of what's going on around me. See, that answers the question as to I could go into the seediest, low-life bar, the type that, you can smell the urinal from the sidewalk. I used to love those, but I mean, I'd walk in and I'd feel, edgy, and I'd take a few drinks, and all of a sudden it's, I love that color of red that they have there. Oh, I love that music on the jukebox. And look at all my best friends. I can just change my perception of everything around me by drinking. You see, normal people do not get that reaction from alcohol, nor do they get the phenomenon of craving. Or if they even get into a little bit of trouble with alcohol, they say, oh. You see, rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous are not filled with people that just get in a little trouble and they go, oh, I'd better stop. You see, it's kind of like normal people, they see that cliff or the edge, right? And they go, oh, I wouldn't want to go there. Somebody gives them a warning and they go, oh, wouldn't want to go there. You see, rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous are filled with people like me, as far as I know, that we see the edge and we go, yes, boom, just jump right over. No stopping. Given sufficient reason, I can't stop drinking. Given sufficient reason, and I was given sufficient reason again and again and again and again, and I can't stop. Lived on the streets for about 1.5 years. The words are demoralizing. I got to tell you, when I made it to Alcoholics Anonymous a few years later, when they used those words, pitiful and incomprehensible demoralization, I did not have to nudge the person next to me and say, what do they mean by that? But I'd never heard those words used together before, never heard that phrase before, but I didn't have to ask what it meant. And to make a long story short, I was back in the Seattle area and a drug deal went very, very badly. I joined the Navy. Here's what I did. What I'm about to tell you should scare the daylights out of you, but on my way into the Navy, I passed a potential test that qualified me to become a nuclear engineer. That should scare the daylights out of you that the Navy was even thinking possibly, remotely, even maybe putting me near anything nuclear. But they made me take another test when I showed up, and I couldn't pass that test. It's called a urinalysis test. And I was kicked out of the nuclear program and sent over to this group of guys they affectionately called nuclear waste. And 1.5 years later, I'd been in a bunch of trouble with the Navy already, and I was driving my car into the base one morning. I had a bottle between my legs. I'd been drinking all weekend, and I was late to get back to the ship for what they call quarters at like 7 a.m. in the morning. And at military bases, there's always a guard shack at the front, and the Marine stands duty. And you're supposed to politely drive forward, show him your identification, and he'll check the sticker on your car, and if everything's in order, he will flag you forward. This particular morning, I guess I thought I had another driving man's dream, and I just had a little depth perception problem going on is the problem. And I remember seeing the whites of the Marine's eyes, and I looked down at the speedometer. I was going about 35, 40 miles an hour. I went into a big skid. I hit this median. The car went up on its side and bam, right through the guard shack. I can still see that Marine doing this big dive out of there. And it's one of those moments in your life, and I'm sure many of you have had it, where as it's happening, things start to go into slow motion. And our mind is very aware of every move that's happening as the car is going over, and you're thinking, if I could just rewind my life by 2 seconds, I wouldn't do this. And how am I going to explain this one? You know, and the most significant thing that came up about that was that when I was in the Navy hospital that morning after this accident, I had a number of charges on me, and they were trying to decide whether I was going to get just military charges or civilian charges and what was happening. But the most significant thing that happened that morning is the Navy doctors that morning put me on medical science's best shot at the alcoholic. They prescribed this thing for me. It was a little white pill with a fancy name. It's called ANTIBUSE. Those Navy doctors gave me a little warning about drinking on ANTIBUSE, and I filed that for future reference. What happened over the next week or two is the main reason that I need to be real active in Alcoholics Anonymous even today, because of what started to happen to me over those next 2 weeks when I was on this ANTIBUSE. First thing that started happening is I started counting those days. I just remember it's been about 4 days and I'm on ANTIBUSE. Now it's been about 6 days and I'm on ANTIBUSE. It's been about 8 days, 6 hours, and 15 minutes I'm on ANTIBUSE. As I was counting those days, some strange things started to happen. The other men on the ship, they started to talk behind my back. All 300 of them. Then they started to think behind my back. And this knot that I've been feeling intermittently since I've been a young teenager, when I would, try to straighten up, try to get my life straight if I'd been in jail and my parents were really upset, or if I wound up getting my stomach pumped, and I'd try to not to drink, and this knot, it would come, but I'd never let it get too bad because I'd always drink. And you see, ANTIBUSE only addresses one side of the disease of alcoholism, the physical craving. That supposedly out of fear, I'm not supposed to take the first drink, thereby not set off the phenomenon of craving. But it does nothing for the insanity of the alcoholic trying not to drink. Now, they could have gotten me ANTIBUSE and a little Thorazine, and I might have been, kind of a little comfortable. However, I probably would have been standing watch, and somebody would have said, the ship could be on fire. They go, fire! And I go, yeah? All of a sudden, a declaration of war could have come, and they go, we're going to war, general quarters. But you see, I went slowly nuts while not drinking, and that was the most perplexing thing to me, that everything started to close in on me, and this anger was just about ready to explode inside of me, but yet I wasn't drinking. I didn't know, and I had no solution, no tools for living. Nobody came up and said, hey, you know what, you're experiencing alcoholism at its finest, son. Wouldn't have known that because I wasn't drinking. And so I went AWOL from my ship at about 10 days. Locked myself in a hotel room, Plaza Hotel, 4th and Broadway in San Diego. Bought a bottle of vodka and a shot glass. And I remember sitting there staring at it, and I remember the doctor's warning. It was, if you drink on this ANTIBUSE, you'll get one of two reactions. One is you'll get violently ill. The other one is you might die. So I thought, wonder what reaction I'm going to have. So I took one shot, and nothing happened. Authority had lied to me again, as far as I was concerned. I waited about 2 minutes just to make sure, and I took another shot. All of a sudden, I felt tingly in the face, so I looked in the mirror, and I was like bright red, blotchy and purple in places. Took another shot. All of a sudden, I felt my heart go boom, boom, boom. Looked at my shirt, I was drenched in sweat. Then all of a sudden, I realized I was like hyperventilating. We're doing all right so far. It's all right. You guys are really sick if you think that's funny. I took another shot, and up it came. My sponsor, Eddie C., calls this projectile regurgitation, just straight up and out. Thank God I was in the type of hotel room where the toilet's in the same room as the bed. Now, this type of throwing up was different for me. Now, I had developed what I used to call a tool for, I didn't call it a tool for living till I got here, but one of my tools for living out there was socially throwing up. That's where you get that little sour taste in the back of your throat. Maybe a little bit comes up into your mouth, but not too much. And you can always you get that warning, right? And you kind of go, and you find an appropriate place, whether it be a bush or a bathroom, and you you get rid of it. And then you come back to your friends and ask for mints or some gum and you carry on. But here on this ANTIBUSE, it was coming up and out, and but I found the magic of ANTIBUSE, that if you don't die, and you hang in there, and you keep drinking, and you keep puking, and you keep drinking, and you keep puking for about somewhere between 1 and 2 hours, enough of the ANTIBUSE would kick out of my system and I would quit throwing up, and I'd just be left with red face, hyperventilating, and sweating, and I already told you, I'm all right with that. I did this song and dance on ANTIBUSE for 7 months. I got in more trouble than you can believe, and after about 4 months of it, and I'd gotten in trouble 2 more times, and wound up in the hospital once at that point after 4 months. The ship's doctor's solution to my problem of drinking on top of ANTIBUSE was to increase the level of ANTIBUSE. That got me into the hospital more times. And what it was is that I have the total inability, given sufficient reason, even the threat of death, imminent death, I cannot stop drinking. I just can't. I cannot stop drinking. And after a couple more hospital stays, and one time I was left for dead in a motel parking lot, they had to do reconstructive surgery on my face, reset my jaw, wire it shut, about 28 stitches in my face. And I remember that morning as I came out of the hospital, I turned to the guy and said, as I was leaving and being taken back to my ship, I said, if there's any time I need a drink, it's now. And he agreed. He said, yeah, man, if I looked like you too, I'd want a drink too. And you know, my last night of drinking was January 21st, 1987. It's the last time I took a drink. And it wasn't my idea to get sober. It just sort of happened. I was taken back to the ship by the shore patrol one more time, and orders had been processed on me that I had 2 choices. One was 90 days in the brig, bad conduct discharge, or the other choice was this treatment center. And I don't remember standing at it, you know, I was standing on the gangplank going, and the decision was made for me. My division officer, I'll never forget it, his name was Mr. Whiting. And he just sort of, I didn't like him, hated him, as a matter of fact, but he came up with my sea bag and he just shot me right off and threw me into his car and took me up to this treatment center. And I had him stop by where my car was, and he needed to know where that was so they could put it into impound anyway, but there was still a bottle in there, and I told him I have to get some stuff. And I remember taking that last few hits in my car as he was waiting for me to go. And anyway, I show up at this treatment center, and everybody that's going to show up, everybody that showed up that week, and they came from all sorts of different bases from all over the place, and everybody that was going to showed up that week, we were all going to go through this 45-day thing together. And in the first few days, they were doing administrative paperwork on all of us, and they just sort of had us in these groups, this large group, and they were doing paperwork on us to figure out who half of us were, really, because none of us had transfer orders that we were supposed to show up at this place. We all, you know, wherever we came from, it was kind of like a spur of the moment kind of thing. You know, nobody said, well, next year you're going to be going to treatment, and we will, you know, we'll make sure the paperwork's ready for you. So we were kind of sitting around for a while. And on about the 2nd or 3rd day, this guy raised his hand. His name was PACO. He was from some other base somewhere, and he raised his hand. He goes, I hear this is a program of rigorous honesty. If I'm going to do this staying sober thing, I want you guys to know that PACO's not my real name. My real name's Randy. PACO's just a street name I've had ever since I've been a young kid, and if I'm going to do this thing, I want you guys to call me Randy. Will you guys call me Randy? And all of us were, you know, we were all just kind of looking down at the floor, you know, counting. Yeah, whatever. Hi, Randy, whatever. And but this assistant facilitator who was like looking out for us during this first few days got really excited. Said, my God, this is the first breakthrough of any honesty of any of you SOBs. Went and got him a gold name tag, slapped him on him, said Randy, gold name tag, said whenever we're not around, you're in charge of the floor because we know you're honest. So now, I mean, Randy's the guy that's going to turn you in if you like smoke a cigarette out the bathroom window, go into the staff lounge, steal some caffeinated coffee, or go to the candy machine when you aren't supposed to, any of those types of things, you get turned in by Randy. I hated Randy. Absolutely hated him. On about the 7th day, they took us all to our first meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. At least it was my first meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. I suppose a few of them probably had encountered Alcoholics Anonymous before. I hadn't. I got to tell you that my first impression of Alcoholics Anonymous was a very positive one. I don't really know why, except for, in looking back, I know that I identified with 2 things. I don't remember identifying with anybody on background or race, creed, color, religion, or, I mean, that was a melting pot as far as I could tell in that meeting. Everybody had different backgrounds, they looked different, they were from different walks of life. But you know what? 10 to 12 people must have probably shared in that meeting. It was a participation meeting. They probably each shared for 3 to 5 minutes. But I remember hearing 2 things that I identified with was what happened to us when we do drink and what happens to us when we try not to drink. And people talked about that in a million different ways. But that's what got me, and especially when people talked about the alcoholic mind. Because for the very first time, I remember identifying with what was going on with me when I was desperately trying not to drink on the ANTIBUSE. This one guy got called on, he walked all the way to the front, introduced himself, he said one sentence, and he sat down. Got up there and he said, "My mind would have killed my body a long time ago, except it needed it for transportation." And he sat down. And I just, whoa. I felt great for about 11 seconds. I now know why I felt great. Identification. It only lasted 11 seconds because Randy was 2 seats away from me and wouldn't give me my cigarettes. The next night we went to another meeting, and I got very confused at that meeting because everybody at that meeting was talking about something called a drug of choice. I don't know what kind of meeting it was, but people were using that term. I used to hear it a lot before. Now a little bit here and there, but man, back in the 80s and early 90s, you hear it all the time. My drug of choice is, and my drug of choice was. People were saying that, and I'd be going, was I supposed to be choosing out there? Do they want me to choose now? What are they talking about? So I remember asking my counselor the next morning, Mary Weber, non-alcoholic, wonderful woman. The reason I think she's wonderful is that she was very devoted to what she was doing, and she was non-alcoholic. In my life, I must regard her as a saint then, just like the Society of Alcoholics Anonymous regards Dr. Silkworth as a saint, because he worked day and night working with alcoholics, and he was not an alcoholic. I mean, that takes some kind of devotion that I don't understand, because, I mean, we work with each other because we'll die if we don't, right? But what does it take for a non-alcoholic to do that? Man. But anyway, I asked Mary, last night in the meeting they were talking about something called a drug of choice. What do they mean by that? She said, "Karl, let's play a little game." Okay. She said, if I walked into this room and I had a tray, and on that tray I had a bottle of Jack Daniels, an ounce of cocaine, and an ounce of Thai sticks, which one would you take? I started to drool immediately. I take them all! I said, no, Karl, play the game. You can only have one. Which one would you take? So I thought for a second. I said, well, I guess I take the ounce of cocaine, Mary. She said, well, then maybe cocaine is your drug of choice. Do you understand now? I said, no. She said, why not? I said, Mary, the only reason I take the ounce of cocaine over the other two is, well, I take that ounce of cocaine, I get the hell out of here, I'd sell 2 8-balls, and now I'd have enough money to buy a quarter pound of Thai sticks and a case of Jack Daniels. That's what I would do. Now, what happened that day is that I learned something very, I didn't even really know that I learned it, but I know that I've never been confused on a very important aspect of Alcoholics Anonymous, that many new people, due to the fact that we make certain announcements as that we only talk about alcohol and Alcoholics Anonymous, the new person who comes in with, like most new people these days, drinking and doing drugs, will selectively hear. And I'm so glad that I just wasn't confused on that, because I run across all sorts of people that are confused on this. They think, well, I've got 30, they like try to juggle 3 different sobriety dates, right? I see some new guy, hey, how long do you got? Sometimes I hear something like this, well, my drinking sobriety date is January 4th. My pot sobriety date is April 3rd. Oh, I blew my methamphetamine date last night. You know, juggling around 3 different sobriety dates. It's one sobriety date. And I'm just so glad I never had to battle with that. See, most people will get that, but a lot of times people that have never, you know, they don't get involved in Alcoholics Anonymous, and they just sort of stand around the outskirts. They never get a sponsor, and they have selective hearing. They hear what they want to hear. And you see, the thing is, we're going after a spiritual awakening here, and it's absolutely impossible to have a spiritual awakening, spiritual experience, or a personality change sufficient to recover from alcoholism if we're doing a little social heroin in between AA meetings. It's not going to happen. It's just not going to happen. You hear funny things from new people. Funniest thing I heard lately, it was a great one. I saw this guy around our group for a while, and I saw him, and I said, hey, good to see you. How long do you got now? He said, well, I had 90 days, but I drank last night, so now I have 89 days. I thought that was a good one. I was just like, yes, he's got some good alcoholic thinking there. Anyway, after 45 days, he's going to let me out of this treatment center. That's just what the orders were, that I'm getting out. And in the last couple of days, they would gather all of us that were going to get out on that Friday. There's just a few less than here. They get us all into the room. They got the biggest, meanest counselor up in front, and he just stood there. He panned the room, just stared at all of us. one by one. Just looked us over. Then he laid the big news on us. Only one out of you 35 will stay continuously sober from this day forward. He said, we've been here for years, and statistics through the years have shown us that only one out of you 35 will stay continuously sober from this day forward. Many of you will die, go insane, wind up in prison. Many of you will relapse once, twice, maybe 20 times and make it back into recovery. But only one will stay continuously sober from this day forward. I remember when he was saying that, and I mean, you know, it was dramatic. I mean, he was like purposely dramatic. They should have had speakers like this. Only one. Right? I remember when he said that, I just remember going, shit. Because there's only one of us is going to make it. It ain't going to be me. I know that. We all know who it's going to be. It's going to be Randy over here, guaranteed. Here at 45 days, he's turned in term papers on acceptance. He's like the poster boy of the treatment center. So on this fateful Friday afternoon, they're letting us all out. They're bringing cars out of impound. There's about 4 or 5 of us being fidgety on the front doorstep of this treatment center, our sea bags at our feet. They're bringing the cars out of impound. And when they finally brought my car out, I was so successful when I was out there getting loaded that when they brought my car out, they brought out my Rolls Canardly. That's the kind of car that rolls down one hill and can hardly make it up the next. The 68 Volkswagen, hole in the floorboard, 12 dents, 2 broken windows, and had to push start the thing. And we're standing there kind of fidgety, and all of a sudden one of the guys goes, hey, look over there. And we look across the parking lot, we see this car, and one of the other guys goes, hey, that's Randy. As we get closer, yeah, that's Randy. As he got a little bit closer, we realized he's drinking already. He's got a bottle. He's pounding it down. As he rolls by us at about 10 miles an hour, he rolls down the window, throws the bottle right at the treatment center. Crash! Gives us all the finger and drives right off. I guess his name was PACO again, I don't know. Next thing that I consciously remember is I showed up at a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous because I didn't know what else to do. Showed up at the North Shore Lano Club in Pacific Beach, 6 o'clock gong show meeting, and I was sitting in the back, and the truth about my life at that time is I was 45 days without a drink or a drug. I had a lot of information, and I was in the best physical condition I've been in a long time. Dangerous. Very, very dangerous. Treatment was an excellent start. Excellent start. But I did not get the necessary spiritual awakening or spiritual experience or personality change. What I got was some safe time and some information. And what was even more dangerous is I had no idea how much trouble I was in at 45 days without a drink or a drug. No idea how dangerous that I was sitting there looking better, feeling better with information, dying of the disease of alcoholism, looking better, feeling better, and had information. And all I ever wore whenever I left the Navy base, and all I wore for a long time before I got sober and for a while after I got sober, whenever I left that Navy base, I would stop by a gas station, get out of that uniform or something else, and I'd put on my other uniform, black leather pants, black leather jacket, black tank top, black boots. I'd stand in front of one of those wall blow dryers with a bunch of hairspray and stuff, and I'd get my hair to stand straight up, and I put on long dangly earrings and sunglasses at night. A friend of mine told me at that point in my life I was suffering from what he calls IRS problems. That's imaginary rock star is what that is. And I'm sitting in the back of this meeting, and one guy operating on his primary purpose that night leaned over to me and said, hey, never seen you here before. What are you doing? I didn't think quick enough to lie to him, and I said, well, I just got out of this Navy treatment center and got me. I don't know what I'm doing. His eyes went bing, big smile went across his face, and I'm wondering, whoa, why is he so excited? I now know what he was so excited about. There's 2 reasons. First reason is this man had just run across the rare occasion in Alcoholics Anonymous, very rare, of meeting a newcomer who accidentally admitted he didn't know what he was doing. That got him, whoa, got a live one here, yes. But there was something else going on in this guy's life, in particular that night, that made him especially glad to meet me. This guy was about a year and a half sober in Alcoholics Anonymous, going to a lot of meetings, had a sponsor, doing what he was supposed to do in Alcoholics Anonymous. But the night before, Thursday night, this woman he'd been dating since he'd been brand new in Alcoholics Anonymous had left him for another man in AA. So he was wondering what to do with his weekend. Homicide, suicide, get loaded, or grab this newcomer. He was like all over me all weekend. We went to like 18 meetings of Alcoholics Anonymous that weekend. This guy was nuts over this woman. Just nuts. You know, we'd go to meeting after meeting after meeting, and he'd run off and talk to these old guys in the corner, and they just laugh, pat him on the head, tell him something, he'd run over to me, we're going to another meeting. And we'd hop into his car, and he'd throw me in the passenger side of the car, and he'd start driving, and he'd start yelling. He wouldn't even be looking at the road. He had one of those AA autopilot cars that made it to the next meeting with nobody looking, right? He'd just start yelling at me. You got to go to meetings, you got to read the book, you got to get a sponsor. God damn that bitch. Got to go to meetings, got to read the book. Damn her. Just nuts over this woman. At one of the meetings, he got called on by one of his friends to read a portion of chapter 5, and he got up there and he said, rarely have we seen a person fail who has thoroughly followed her path. Those who do not recover, people who cannot or will not completely give themselves a simple program. Usually women who are constitutionally incapable. It's just crazy. So what I was experiencing was I got a very early introduction to your typical AA relationship breakup is what I got. But the fact of the matter is that man's reaction to his pain that night saved my life. Had he had not done that, what he did, I wouldn't have known to go to another meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. And I had a whole weekend ahead of me. What I probably would have done is I would have slithered out of the back of that meeting when it was over, gone and push-started my car, and started driving around San Diego. After about a half an hour, I'd be going, I'm sober. I'm sober. It's about 9 o'clock. Maybe I'll just swing by the bar and I'll drink some near beer. I suppose if I was going to drink some near beer, I may as well go get some near pot and some near cocaine. Wouldn't that be a killer weekend? Case full of near beer, some oregano, and a bag full of Italian baby laxative. Yeah. But by going to so many meetings in the same area of town with this guy, I learned something so valuable about Alcoholics Anonymous that I did not know. I'm sure they told me. I'm sure they told me in that treatment center. Didn't hear it. That people go to multiple meetings of Alcoholics Anonymous, even people with time. You know, I guess for some reason I might have thought that Alcoholics Anonymous is a place where when you get out of treatment, go to a few meetings. If you find one that you like, remember where it is. If you ever get into trouble, go there. So now, of course, I didn't carry that thinking out. If I really carry that thinking out, that Alcoholics Anonymous is a place where after you get out of a treatment center, you shop around for a couple of meetings. If you find one that you like, remember where it is, and if you ever get into trouble, go. Let's say I found one on a Thursday night that I liked, and so I remembered where it was. I'd better hope that I only get into trouble on Thursday nights. Right? It does not work. But and you could have told me, you know what, we go to a lot of meetings. People in Alcoholics Anonymous go to a lot of meetings. You could have told me and I wouldn't have heard you. But seeing it firsthand, by going to so many meetings with this guy and seeing a lot of the same people. Now, I didn't see anybody else going to 18 meetings that weekend, just me and this guy. But I saw other people that went to 2, 3, 4, and 5 meetings over the weekend that had time, 6 months, 6 years, 25 years. You know, I saw them a few times over the weekend. And what I learned about how we go to meetings of Alcoholics Anonymous, especially when we're new, I'm going to correlate it to a football game. Now, a football team is out there on that field for one reason and one reason only, to win the game. That's why they're out there. That's why they get paid all that money, and that's why they get beat up and have to limp the rest of their lives after 30 years old. That's why they're up, to win the game. And how do they do that? How do they win that game? They huddle up and they do one play. Huddle up, new plan, one play. Only in an emergency will they huddle up and do 2 or 3 plays in a row. But it's always huddle up, new plan, one play. It's exactly what we do here in Alcoholics Anonymous, and the game around here is one day without a drink. And how do we do that? You know, one day without a drink and you're a winner. How do we do that? We run in here and we huddle up. Go, remember, we're bodily, mentally different from our fellows. Break! And we go out there and we try a little of this, do a little of that, do a little of this. We run right back in here and we huddle up. And we go, remember, we're bodily, mentally different from our fellows. And just before we break, some guy in the corner might go, wait, hang on. Been here for 6 months. I'm sober, but I'm broke and I'm bored. Some old timer will look over his glasses and say, get a job, break. And we go out there and we try a little of this, try a little of that. We run right back in here and we huddle up. We go, remember, we're bodily, mentally different from our fellows. And just before we break, some woman might go, wait, hang on. This is really embarrassing because I've been here for 7 years. But my boyfriend, he's like new in AA. And he's got my ATM card and the code, my car, my checkbook, and I'm sleeping with all my friends. What do I do? Some old-timer woman would put down her knitting and say, get rid of the bastard! Break! And we go out there and we try a little of this. And you see, at the same time, see, I got to remember that I'm bodily mentally different from them out there. But at the same time, I got to remember that I'm bodily mentally similar to you in here. That is why I must accept your totally bizarre, as far as I was concerned when I was new, solution. Totally different bodily and mentally than what other people who are seeking a spiritual path out there. Other people seeking a spiritual path out there that are normal. And when I say normal, I'm just talking about people that don't have the same mental and physical relationship to alcohol that I do. I'm not saying that they're necessarily happy, successful, or spiritual. Maybe or maybe not. But when normal people seek a spiritual path, they can take a glass of wine once in a while, because they're bodily different. I must accept a completely different bodily solution, which is continued entire abstinence, or I will never find a spiritual path as an alcoholic. Never. And mentally, I'm just going to encompass spiritually and emotionally also. We got to do weird stuff. We got to do this strange, bizarre walk through the desert they call the steps of Alcoholics Anonymous. Amazing ego-smashing, this terribly gut-wrenching transformation that we got to take, and it's not easy. You know, we got, people in Alcoholics Anonymous, a day-to-day thing is like, you might wake up and say, oh, TV's gone. Most people would call the police. Most of us say, oh, yeah, probably Joe. We let him sleep on the couch last night. Weird stuff. Weird stuff goes on in Alcoholics Anonymous that we just take for granted, right? And I got to do strange stuff. I got to tell you, if I were not alcoholic, I would not be here on Valentine's Day. Would not have, Candace wouldn't have been here on Valentine's. She raised her eyebrows. I guarantee you. You have to go speak on Valentine's Day. And then she just sort of took a deep breath and said, yeah. Okay. We alcoholics have to do strange things, really strange things. I'm almost out of time. Got out of the Navy with an honorable discharge. My first sponsor rocketed me into the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, and he just took me page by page, line by line through it. And his sponsor also was working with me. And they made me do a lot of things I didn't want to do. At 2 years sober, I got an honorable discharge out of the Navy, moved up here. I was going to go to school, and the only reason I was going to go to school was simply because my amends step said I either had to pay my parents back for that degree that they had paid for, or I could go get what they had paid for in the first place. And I remember, through having to make amends, I still was at 2 years sober getting out of that Navy, and I'd had a constant paycheck those 2 years. I was still driving that Volkswagen, puttering on up here. Now it had a bigger hole in the floorboard, one more broken window, and a headlight and I still had to push start the thing, and I was driving on up, and as I was going up the 605, I was going to go apply at this school, and I showed up in Covina, but as I was going up that 605, I remember thinking, well, I'm going to go to school, and I'm going to have to work, and I'm going to, I'll stop by some meetings every once in a while. Amazed before I'm halfway through, but I'm about ready to quit before I'm halfway through, and within 5 miles, I see some guy going by that and seems to have a life, and I'm going, where's mine? I'm 2 years sober in AA, where's mine? So I'm looking for a reward for being given a gift. Doesn't work. That's kind of like when you stand in line for that lottery and you think you deserve the lottery because you're sober. Most of us think that. Don't act like you don't. It's like looking for a reward for being given a gift. No, wrong. I'm so grateful. I pulled into this meeting in Covina, and that's where I met the sponsor I have today, Eddie C. He had this medallion that said 1951, and I thought, was he born then? He was much too old for that. That's when he got sober. He'd been sober 10 years when I was born. And he poured me a cup of coffee. He's a coffee maker at the noon meeting. And he changed my perception of life. As I was telling him, early on when I got to know him, I was trying to tell him these plans I had. Go to school, work, and I'll stop by meetings every once in a while. He just laughed, patted me on the head, and said, going to school and working is a wonderful thing for a young man recovering from alcoholism. But Karl, those are the things we do in between meetings. Meetings is not what we try to fit in between a busy life like that. And after about a week, as I thought that, it was one of those amazing things as you walk around pacing in front of the Alano Club. What did he say? What did he really say? It was kind of like the very first time when I heard, if you don't take the first drink, you can't get drunk. I remember pacing up and down the street. Wow. Oh. There's an amazing thing. One of those things that just nails you. But don't go and tell non-alcoholic people stuff like that. I remember calling my mom, telling her, Mom, you wouldn't believe what I heard in the meeting. They said if I don't take the first drink, I won't get drunk. There was silence on the other end of the line. Then she said, bunch of philosophers there in that AA program, huh? But anyway, everything I was planning on doing has materialized. My life has become, in the last 10 years, something I never even dreamed of. I don't even know how to describe it. But what really is that there's a power greater than myself that I have some sort of relationship with that keeps me calm. That I no longer experience that insanity like when I was on the ANTIBUSE. That through working the steps of Alcoholics Anonymous and constant action in Alcoholics Anonymous, I can like take a deep breath and everything's all right. I've got a life that is good. It's really, really good. And I'm just surrounded by newcomers all the time. I just absolutely love it. I love listening to their plans and their stories. It's just better than watching HBO Comedy Hour. It really is. I just love listening to those things. And I have some very, very good people in my life, and the relationship with my family has been repaired, and my father died this year, and it was, but the thing is that because of Alcoholics Anonymous, there was nothing left unsaid, there was nothing left undone, and he had seen me sober for almost 10 years. And I was able to fly up and be a part of the family up in Seattle. You know, they didn't have to do the calling around to find out where I was type thing. You know, I had the same phone number for about 6 years. Amazing, amazing. And, you know, there's a woman here that I just love to death, just love Candace to death, and she loves me to death, and we're going to go spend Valentine's together. God bless. Thanks.
Okay, this is how I prepare my drone for launching. I like to do it inside the cab of my truck so I'm not standing outside in the weather. To install the joysticks for control, up and down, right and left, powered on. I have an Android phone that I use to connect it to the drone with. And it's actually controlled through the iPhone, through an app. Oops, wrong way. It's actually controlled through the iPhone, or through this Android phone, through the app. It's actually controlled through the Android phone, through an app, and you connect it through this short connection right here.
Remote control connected.
Remote control is connected. So I pull out the drone. I have to extend the legs. Long legs extended first, then the short legs. Remove the gimbal protector. Set that aside, then power it on one short burst, then one long burst. I lay it down. So I have to go to calibrate. So the drone's not connected yet. It shows you here as this drone gets disconnected, even though the remote's powered on. So the drone has to establish it's connected. So I go into the app to calibration mode. First I'll calibrate the remote controller. Start calibration. Out, in, oop, out, in, up, down, and then this little wheel is to control the gimbal. So it's calibrated. Go to gimbal calibration, start calibration, and then it calibrates the gimbal. I don't know if that shows up. The gimbal's moving all over the place. Changes, you can see it on the video. And I'm calibrated to take off. It's acquired 7 satellites at the moment. There are 26 satellites up in the sky, which it has to acquire before you can take off. So it's connected. It's got enough satellites. This is white. I can go to press this little arrow button, swipe right to take off, and it would start the motors if I slid this to the right, but I'll wait till I get outside. Don't want to do it inside.